Welcome back to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're tuning in today because we're going to demystify something that usually happens entirely behind closed doors. Have you ever actually wondered about the hidden, highly structured process that takes place the second you sit down in a counselor's office? Well, today we're pulling back the curtain on the architecture of therapy. We'll be decoding the exact invisible frameworks professionals use to really understand the human mind.
So let's step into the client's shoes for a second. Imagine you're walking into a therapy session for the very first time. You take a seat, the door clicks shut, and the conversation starts. But what is your therapist actually analyzing in those crucial first few moments? See, they aren't just politely listening to your words. They're silently piecing together a massive, complex puzzle, and they're using a highly specific methodology to do it.
Here's a quick look at our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll kick things off with modern, practical procedures, looking at the counseling cycle, the intake interview, and the phases of treatment. Then we're going to make a fascinating pivot to the historical roots of the whole profession, diving into Freud, psychoanalysis, and the structure of personality.
Let's jump right into Section 1, the counseling cycle, which is really a continuous model.
Okay, we have to establish a fundamental truth right out of the gate. Counseling is not just talking. It's a continuous, cyclical model. Literally from the first moment a counselor meets you, they are assessing data. In those critical first 2 or 3 sessions, a counselor has 4 primary goals. They're screening you, forming a diagnosis, planning your treatment, and setting up a way to actually evaluate your progress. It's highly deliberate. It's totally data-driven. The goal isn't just to chat, right? It's to build a holistic, actionable view of the problem immediately, so both of you can start collaboratively setting goals.
Moving on to Section 2, the intake interview, or as I like to think of it, gathering the blueprint.
An intake interview is basically an investigation. The counselor is hunting for very specific clues to build a comprehensive picture of your life. They'll probe into your family history and stability, asking stuff like how many jobs you've held or how many times your family moved. If you're a student, they track school changes to measure your foundational stability. They're looking at your medical history, your education, and substance use. They even ask about local cultural habits, for example, chewing a stimulant called chat in certain regions, just to fully grasp your daily reality and how you cope. Literally, every single question is designed to measure your resilience and stability.
And this brilliantly shows how a counselor maps out the exact triggers of a problem. Because right after that general intake, they do a problem identification interview. They don't just ask, "So, why are you sad?" No, they isolate the problem into specific components. They look at your feelings, like somatic or bodily physical reactions. They look at your cognitions, meaning your internal dialogue, your self-talk. And they look at your behaviors. They'll analyze the interpersonal effects, like how this specifically impacts your friends and family. They even map the exact patterns. When does it happen? Where? With whom? It's a remarkably structured behavioral map.
Which brings us to Section 3, phases of treatment, the actual clinical journey.
So, once the problem is perfectly mapped out, what happens next? We move into the highly structured phases of actual treatment. Let's walk through the American Counseling Association's 3 stages for individual therapy. Stage 1 is the initial stage, and the absolute core focus here is relationship building and trust. Without trust in Stage 1, nothing else is going to work. But once that's established, Stage 2 shifts entirely into action. This middle stage is where you and the counselor identify problems, create definitive goals, and explore alternatives. And finally, the termination stage. This is where you evaluate your progress, apply those solutions to the real world, and prepare to end the formal counseling relationship.
Now, let's contrast those one-on-one sessions with group counseling. According to Corey's model, group therapy navigates through 6 distinct stages. It kicks off with formation, and interestingly, the ideal group size is strictly 7 to 8 members. Any smaller, and it just turns into individual counseling with an audience. Any larger, and you lose that sense of intimacy. After formation comes orientation and exploration, which builds up to a very tricky, totally inevitable stage called dealing with resistance. That's followed by cohesion and productivity, consolidation, and finally, evaluation and follow-up.
The absolutely crucial turning point in group therapy is navigating that 3rd stage, dealing with resistance. The famous psychiatrist Irvin Yalom actually labeled this the conflict, dominance, rebellion stage. As group members try to figure out their roles, they battle for control and power. A social pecking order inevitably emerges, and the counselor has to expertly act as a referee here, managing this intense conflict and preventing personal attacks so the group can actually survive long enough to reach genuine cooperation.
All right, Section 4, Freud and psychoanalysis, which is our big historical pivot.
To truly understand all these modern phases, we have to look at the man who started it all.
And what's truly fascinating is Sigmund Freud himself. He pioneered entirely new ways to understand human behavior, but his own life was incredibly turbulent. During his most creative years, he endured severe emotional problems, exaggerated fears of dying, and intense phobias. Through his own grueling self-analysis, he remembered having deep hostility toward his authoritarian father. This is a guy who worked grueling 18-hour days and later in life went through 33 agonizing operations for jaw cancer. It's profoundly ironic, really. The man who birthed modern therapy was wrestling with such severe demons himself.
So, let's contrast our highly structured, goal-oriented modern intakes with Freud's original view of human nature. Freud believed our minds are basically like an iceberg. The conscious, orderly goal setting we just talked about, that's just the tip. Beneath the surface, human behavior is completely deterministic. He believed we're driven by a massive, chaotic tangle of irrational forces, unconscious motivations, and biological instincts that are completely locked in during our first 6 years of life. It's a much more primal view of the mind compared to what we use today, but it's the benchmark that almost all other counseling theories are measured against. Freud believed we're constantly battling two wildly powerful instinctual drives. On one side, we have the life instincts. He originally called this libido to mean sexual energy, but later broadened it to mean all the energy oriented toward growth, survival, and creativity. But on the exact opposite side, we have the death instincts. This accounts for our aggressive drive, an unconscious wish to die or to hurt ourselves or others. According to Freud, managing this aggressive drive isn't just a personal hurdle, it's a major existential challenge for the entire human race.
And that brings us to Section 5, the structure of personality, the architecture of the mind.
To Freud, humans are fundamentally viewed as an energy system. I really want you to lean into this analogy. In this system, your psychic energy is strictly limited. It is a literal zero-sum game inside your head. Because the energy is capped, one psychological system can only gain control by stealing available energy from the others. Basically, your internal drives are in a constant tug-of-war for limited mental resources.
We can break this energy system down into 3 distinct structural components that run your personality. First up is the id, the biological component. Think of it as a beast filled with wild instinctual drives. Directly opposing it is the superego, the social component, a strict pillar representing societal morals and rules. And caught right in the crossfire of those two is the ego. The ego is the psychological component. It controls your consciousness and has the incredibly difficult job of keeping the wild beast at bay, satisfying the strict rules of the pillar, and somehow still navigating the actual real world around you.
So, we've journeyed from the strict, highly structured modern clinical intakes of today, all the way back to Freud's turbulent architecture of the unconscious. I want to leave you with a provocative final thought, challenging you to take what we've unpacked today and analyze the invisible forces driving your own behavior. Look inward at your limited mental resources. In your own personal energy system, which component is winning the battle today? Is it the wild instincts of the id, the practical management of the ego, or the strict social rules of the superego? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll see you next time.